The cold came early that October. It moved across the Wyoming flats like something with intention, low and gray and indifferent, pressing down on the sagebrush, flattening the brittle grass to the color of old bone. By 4 in the morning the temperature had dropped below freezing, and the stars were hard and small overhead, too far away to mean anything warm. Eli Voss had been awake since 3. He didn't sleep past 3 anymore. Hadn't in 2 years. He'd stopped fighting it somewhere in the middle of last winter, stopped staring at the ceiling with his jaw tight, and started just getting up. He moved through the dark house the way a man moves through rooms he has memorized, without switching on lights, without making noise. Past the kitchen table with its 2 chairs. Past the shelf where a photograph sat face down because he hadn't yet decided whether turning it back over would hurt less or more. He pulled on his work jacket, his boots, his hat, and stepped out into the black morning. The ranch was 47 acres. Not big by anyone's measure, but his. He'd inherited the bones of it from his father and spent 15 years adding muscle. The hay shed, the repaired fencing, the stock tank that no longer leaked. It was the kind of place that looked like hard work and nothing else, which suited Eli fine because hard work was the one language left that he understood completely. He walked toward the barn to check on the horses, as he did every morning. The gravel crunched. His breath made small ghosts. He was 10 yards from the barn door when he stopped. A lantern was still burning inside. Faint, warm, a thread of amber under the gap at the bottom of the door. He hadn't left a lantern on. The night before had started the same as every other. Eli ate alone. Beans and cornbread, a glass of water, and sat on the porch watching the sky go violet, then purple, then the specific dark that meant done. He wasn't watching for anything. He was just sitting the way men sit when a house has gotten too quiet to stay inside. He almost missed her. She came up the dirt road from the south on foot, in the rain that had started just after 6. He heard the gravel before he saw her. Small footsteps, uneven, the sound of someone who'd been walking for longer than made sense. When she came into the reach of the porch light, she stopped. She looked at him. She didn't flinch. She was young. Late 20s, maybe 30, with dark hair plastered flat against her face and rain running in rivulets down her jaw. Her jacket was thin. Summer weight. Wrong for October. Her shoes, he noticed, were canvas sneakers, and the right one had a sole that was beginning to separate at the toe. She carried no bag, no purse, nothing. In her right hand, held out toward him like something formal, like something she'd been rehearsing, were $3 bills, folded lengthwise, damp, creased to translucence. "I'm not looking for charity," she said. Her voice was steady. That surprised him. "I just need somewhere dry to sleep. I saw the barn. I won't touch anything. I'll be gone before you're up." He looked at the $3. He looked at her shoes. He looked at the bruise, faint purple, the shape of a thumb, along the inside of her left wrist where her sleeve had ridden up in the rain. He almost said no. He stood at the edge of saying no for a full 5 seconds. "There's a horse in there," he said finally. "Name's Cantor. He doesn't like strangers. Don't go near his stall." She nodded once. "Precisely." He stepped off the porch and took her $3, because he understood, in the wordless way of someone who had also once been proud and desperate at the same time, that taking them mattered more to her than any warmth he could offer. He led her to the barn. He showed her where the clean horse blankets were folded. He left without asking her name. He watched from the house. He wasn't proud of it, but he did it anyway. Standing back from the kitchen window with the lights off, watching the bar of amber light under the barn door. He stayed steady. There was no sound. Whatever she was doing in there, she was doing it quietly. He noticed things in that long hour of watching. He noticed that no car came looking. No headlights swept the road from the south. No phone rang in the house. Nobody called the number that was nailed to his gatepost, the one that said Voss Ranch in letters his father had painted and Eli had repainted twice since, keeping them clean not out of sentiment but because a man's name on his own gate should always be legible. He noticed, too, that she'd asked for the barn and not the house. That she'd offered money first before anything else. That she'd said, "I'll be gone before you're up," like it was a promise and also an apology. The bruise on her wrist stayed with him in a way he didn't know what to do with. At 8:30 he went to the barn. He knocked twice, then opened the door. She was sitting on a hay bale near Cantor's stall. Not near enough to touch, but near enough to be in his warmth, with a horse blanket around her shoulders and her sneakers lined up beside her, side by side, like she'd been raised right and hadn't forgotten it. Her eyes came up fast. Ready. The kind of ready that doesn't switch off easily. Eli set a tin cup and a shallow bowl on the empty hay bale opposite her. Bean soup from the pot on the stove. Still hot. You don't have to. Cantor's sensitive to tension, Eli said. Hungry people make him nervous. It wasn't true. Cantor was the most even-tempered horse he'd ever owned. But she almost smiled, and that was something. He sat on an overturned bucket near the door. Not close. He wanted her to feel the distance, to know it was deliberate, that she hadn't been cornered. Mara, she said after a while. Eli. She ate slowly, like someone who'd learned to make things last. He asked her nothing. She offered nothing. But the silence between them had a texture to it. Not hostile, not easy, somewhere in the careful middle. And when she'd finished the soup, she held the cup in both hands and stared at the lantern and said, You didn't ask. No. Most people would've. Most people, Eli said, make you feel like you owe them something for it. She looked at him then, not with gratitude, with assessment. Like she was measuring whether he was the kind of person who'd be one thing tonight and another thing later. He held still under it. He was used to being looked at by animals who'd been treated badly. The technique was the same. Don't move, don't perform, let them reach their own conclusion. Whatever she concluded, she didn't say. But her shoulders came down a 1/4 inch and she turned back to the lantern, and she stopped holding the cup like a weapon. Hey? Eli went back to the house at 9. He locked the front door, not from habit but deliberately, checking the bolt twice and then checking it again without quite knowing why. He left the porch light on. He sat in the kitchen and read 3 pages of a seed catalog without registering a word of it, and then he went to the window and looked out at the barn. The truck came at midnight. He heard it before he saw it. A diesel engine idling low, the kind of low that means someone who doesn't want to be heard is trying not to be heard and failing. Headlights off. It rolled past the gate slowly, too slowly for any road out here where the closest neighbor was 6 miles and nobody drove past the Voss gate by accident. It stopped. The engine kept running. Eli was on his feet and to the bedroom closet before he'd made a conscious decision. He took the rifle from the high shelf, loaded because an unloaded gun in Wyoming served about as much purpose as a garden ornament, and came back to the window. The truck was dark. American-made. A dent along the rear panel that caught a sliver of moonlight. A man got out of the driver's side. Just one. He stood at the gate and looked at the barn, and then he looked at the house. He was broad through the shoulders. He wasn't hurrying. In the barn, the lantern went out. She knew. She'd killed the light the second she heard the engine. That told Eli everything he needed to know about what kind of knowing this was. Not the first-time panic of an ordinary woman followed by an ordinary man. This was practiced. This was the reflex of someone who had run before. Eli unlocked the front door and walked out. Hey? He didn't run. Running was for people who were afraid, and Eli was not afraid. He was deliberate, which was a different and more dangerous thing. He walked across the gravel in the dark with the rifle held at his side, not raised, and he stopped at the gate and looked at the man across it. The man was younger than Eli. Thick neck, heavy jaw. Eyes that moved too much, touching every corner of the yard, the barn, the house, the rifle, and back again. You got a woman staying in your barn, the man said. Not a question. I got horses in my barn, Eli said. What I don't have is patience for people on my land after midnight. She's my wife. Is that so? I just want to talk to her. Eli looked at him, long and level and without expression. He thought about the bruise on her wrist. He thought about the $3 bills. He thought about the way she'd sat in the barn with her shoes lined up side by side, like someone maintaining order in a life that had long since stopped being orderly. Here's what's going to happen, Eli said. You're going to get back in that truck. You're going to drive out to the county road and you're going to turn left, which takes you away from here. And if I see those headlights again tonight, I'm gonna call the sheriff and tell him I've got a trespasser. And the thing about our sheriff is that he is a personal friend of mine and a man who takes a very dim view of people who show up to other people's property in the dark." Silence. The man's jaw worked. His eyes went to the barn one more time. Then he looked at the rifle, still loose at Eli's side. Not raised, not threatening. Simply present the way a fence post is present. The way a locked gate is present. He got back in the truck. He drove. Eli stood at the gate until the sound of the diesel engine had faded into nothing, and then he stood there a little longer, in the cold, listening to the silence that came after, making sure it held. He didn't go to the barn that night. He didn't want her to feel watched. He went back inside and sat in the kitchen until 2 in the morning, and then he went to the window one last time and the barn was dark and still and he went to bed. He slept until almost 5, which was the longest he'd slept in 2 years. When he went out in the gray pre-dawn to start his chores, the barn door was closed exactly as he'd left it. Inside, the horse blankets were folded, not returned to a pile, but properly folded, each one squared and stacked with the kind of deliberate care that is indistinguishable from gratitude. Cantor was calm, well settled, nosing his hay with the satisfaction of a horse who'd been in quiet company all night. The tin cup from the evening before was clean, dried, and placed on the same hay bale where she'd sat, rim down, the way you put a cup when you want to leave the surface ready for the next person. She was gone, and she had been thorough about it. No trace, no impression in the hay, no dropped thing, as if she had made herself small enough to pass through without leaving a mark, which Eli suspected she had spent a long time learning to do. Then he saw the lantern. It was on the grain shelf where he always kept it, but tucked underneath it, folded in thirds, smooth, like it had been folded and refolded until the words inside were settled, was a piece of paper, torn from something. Paper bag, maybe. The handwriting was small and even and slanted slightly to the left, the script of someone who'd learned to write in a hurry and never had the leisure to slow down. He stood in the cold barn and read it. He read it twice. She wrote that she had been walking for 4 days, that she had $11 left when she reached his gate, which meant she had $8 left now, which was enough for a bus ticket to her sister's place in Billings if she caught the 6:30 from the highway stop 3 miles north. She wrote that she was sorry for the trouble, and that she knew trouble was what she'd brought, and that she had spent a long time believing she did not deserve doorways, that the most she could ask of the world was its barns and its edges and its leftover spaces where no one important would miss her if she disappeared. And then she wrote, "You took my $3. I know why you did. It's the only kindness I've been given in 2 years that didn't cost me something worse." She wrote that she hoped his horses were well. She wrote that Cantor had let her put her hand on his nose at around 3 in the morning, which she thought meant he'd decided she was all right, and that she would carry that, a horse deciding she was all right, for a long time. She wrote at the very end in letters slightly larger than the rest, as if she'd pressed harder without meaning to. "I hope whoever it is you've turned that photograph away from, I hope you find your way back to looking at it. You're worth looking at things again." Eli stood very still in the barn. Something moved through him. Not pain exactly, not the familiar dull grief he'd managed for 2 years like a low-grade fever. Something different, something that broke along a different fault line and let air in. His hands, he noticed, were not quite steady. He put the letter in his jacket pocket. He went to the house. He stood in front of the shelf for a long moment, and then he reached out and turned the photograph face up. His wife, 7 years ago, laughing at something off camera, her head thrown back, completely unself-conscious. He'd forgotten that about her, the way she laughed without watching herself laugh. He stood with the photograph for a while, long enough to let it be something he was looking at instead of something he was surviving. Then he picked up his keys. He drove, not with urgency, not recklessly, but with the particular intention of a man who has made a decision and is no longer negotiating with himself about it. 3 miles north on the county road, where a concrete bench sat at the highway junction under a tin shelter that barely counted as a roof. She was there, sitting on her bag. He realized now it had been tucked behind the hay bale all along, that she'd had it with her the whole time and he simply hadn't seen it. Her jacket was buttoned to the collar. Her ruined canvas shoes were laced tight. She was sitting straight-backed, the way people sit when they are pretending to themselves that they are fine. He pulled up and stopped. He got out of the truck. He stood a few feet from the bench. The sun was just beginning to breach the flat horizon, turning the whole world copper and pale blue. She looked at him, that same measuring look. Guarded. Unbroken. "You read it," she said. "I read it." A beat. Wind moved through the shelter. Somewhere down the highway, a hawk tilted on a thermal and disappeared. "I wasn't asking you to come," she said. "I know. I'm fine. I know that too." She looked at him. He didn't fill the silence. He'd learned, the way ranchers and quiet men learn, that silence left alone long enough will tell you what it actually is. What it was this time was exhaustion. Real exhaustion, not the kind that sleep fixes. The kind that comes from carrying something heavy for so long that you've forgotten you're carrying it. Forgotten your own shoulders are up by your ears. Forgotten there was ever a time when walking wasn't work. "Billings is 4 hours," he said. "I'll drive you." "You don't. I haven't left this county in 14 months. He said it simply, without weight. "I think I'm overdue." She was quiet for a long moment. The copper light moved across the flats. A meadowlark sang somewhere, 3 notes, then stopped, then 3 notes again. She picked up her bag. She stood. She looked at him one more time, not measuring now, just looking the way you look at something you're deciding to believe in. She got in the truck. He got in. He started the engine. He did not go back toward the ranch. He pulled out onto the highway headed north, into the low copper morning, into the wide open distance that stretched ahead of them without walls and without edges and without any particular end in sight. Neither of them said anything for a while. It was enough. The meadowlark sang again, and this time it didn't stop.